Welcome to One-on-One with Walt Lascos. In this brief podcast, you'll learn how to most effectively address senior financial exploitation. Now, here's Walt.
Today, I'm privileged to have as my special guest Tony Steuer, an internationally recognized financial preparedness advocate, podcaster, award-winning author, and fintech advisor. Tony is an expert content reviewer for NerdWallet and Bankrate, as well as a member of the Forbes Advisor Insurance Advisory Board. Tony, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, glad to be here. Well, thanks for having me on today.
Well, Tony, before we focus our conversation on financial scam prevention, please give us and our listeners all a bit more details describing your work and your experience.
Well, I started off quite a few years ago as a life insurance agent, and I quickly found that most people in the whole life insurance ecosystem didn't really understand insurance policies, life insurance policies. So I became a fee-based insurance consultant, and essentially what I did was I worked for other advisors like financial planners, litigation attorneys, trust officers, reviewing in-force life insurance policies and proposed policies. And during that time, I also joined the California Department of Insurance Curriculum Board. And so I got to see a lot behind the scenes of good things and bad things with life insurance policy. So I really became focused on helping advocate for best practices in the life insurance industry. And since that time, I've taken a greater interest and been more involved with the financial literacy movement overall, is because life insurance is so closely interwoven into everyone's financial lives.
You know, I think you're right on target with that, Tony, because when you think about it, particularly today with financial scams and fraud being such an overwhelming problem that we're having, it's important that all areas of the financial services industry collaborate together to address and try to mitigate these types of scams and fraud. Scams and fraud, in many respects, too, we think about it, are usually people think that it's older folks, right, that are falling victim to scams. But really, it's all of us. All of the age groups are being targeted. So given your background then, from your perspective, what's your take on the skyrocketing growth of financial scams and fraud today?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily higher than it's ever been. I think that because of our connectivity and the ability to communicate to a wider audience, that everybody essentially has a platform, that there's just more focus on it and more is known about it. I think that a lot of this happened over the years, and people were just in the dark because it wasn't communicated what was really going on and what kind of scams and frauds existed. And I think the other thing that we don't talk a lot about, Walt, is sort of maybe a softer fraud where somebody places, in this case, since life insurance is my expertise, but they place a life insurance policy that doesn't really fit someone's needs, or they do an unnecessary replacement, things to generate extra fees and commissions. So while that's not technically fraud, I would say that's taking advantage of the consumer. And I think that's a big part of it.
That makes a very good point, because if someone is still, in a way, it may not be clearly manipulation, but in a way it kind of touches upon it, where if someone is looking to make a sale for whatever that sale is and get the consumer or the customer to sign up for a certain type of policy, even though it may not be the best fit for them, there's one could say there's kind of deception involved there. And that's not right. So it's good to hear that there are folks like yourself that really monitor those situations to ensure that the industry is being compliant with all the best practices that there are to ensure that, customers get exactly the best fit that they're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. And on the part of the regulators are constantly playing catch up. So one, they're trying to predict what could potentially happen, and two, they have to react to what actually happens in the marketplace. So it's oftentimes a very challenging thing, is because people are out there on the street meeting with consumers or working with other advisors or what have you, and they're creating all these new types of marketing practices, products, or whatever. And so they start stretching the limit, and sometimes that's where either it crosses into a fraud or a scam. So we can talk about, really, where is that line crossed from taking advantage of the consumer to it actually being a scam?
Mm-hmm.
And what does that consist of? So a good example is a friend of ours. She's 25, no kids, no dependents whatsoever. She was talking into buying this life insurance policy under this program called Be Your Own Banker, which has a lot of faults, and we can get into that if you'd like. But essentially, she was paying $600 a month for a life insurance policy for no reason, instead of putting money into a retirement plan. So is that fraud? No. Is it a scam? Yeah, for me, it's starting to cross that line, because it's not a product that she needed, but it's not illegal or against the insurance code to do that. Now, with some of the best interest rules and fiduciary practices, it's starting to cross over that line. But that's where I see a lot of the huge issues occurring, especially when you were talking about with younger people. That's more how younger people are taken advantage of.
Yeah, and I think that is a good point, because while older folks basically have a lot more money in terms of savings, they tend to be the ones that lose more money. However, young adults, they're online, they're doing a lot, and they are also being targeted, and many of them are also falling, to scams and fraud. Now, I'm wondering, are there any obviously blatant things that you've experienced or seen happen within the insurance industry that are clearly a scam? And now, for example, Tony, today I got a text from EasyPass, right? So that when I go through toll booths, things of that sort, it automatically deducts it. Well, I got an email basically saying that the account is going to close because it's not charging to my credit card, and please make it right. And they added a URL link. Well, obviously the URL link was not to EasyPass. So it's set up as a very easy scam. Send a text out, blanket text, and hey, if you could hit 3 or 4 people out of 1,000 and get them to put all kind of money that you could gather, bingo, you're doing well as a scammer. Do you see any blatant things like that within the insurance industry?
Yeah, definitely. And the thing that we all have to keep in mind is that scammers are very good at what they do. And they spend a lot of time and effort. I wish they'd put as much time and effort into doing honest things as as going into scams. But unfortunately, they put a lot of time and effort into scams. So I think, there's a few things that scammers always do, especially with elderly people, is especially elderly people who are, more subject to cognitive decline. We all suffer some degree of cognitive decline after age 60. So, we may be more open to risk taking than you would think with older people. But what happens is isolation. And that's one of the big things that happens with scammers, and that I've seen, is they isolate the elder, and they say, oh, you don't need to talk to your kids about this. That you don't want to worry them about this. So, if you're an older person and you ever hear that, don't talk to your friends about it. They don't need to know. You're just bothering them. That's a definite warning sign, is that isolation. Another thing too is high pressure, is like receiving that text, and it says, like, you need to do this right now or you're going to lose this thing. And that's another thing that scammers do, is they'll put pressure on people of all ages, but especially on the elderly, saying, hey, you need to do this right now or there's going to be a problem. And so that's another thing, is when somebody's putting on a lot of pressure and they're giving you a deadline, you have to ask yourself, is this a real deadline, or is this a deadline that they're imposing? And when they start to do that, they start to isolate you. They start to give you a deadline. And the other thing is, we've all heard this adage, but we all tend to forget it. If it's too good to be true, then it most likely is. And I think the other thing that people tend to forget is that insurance companies are very savvy financial service businesses. They've been around, some of them for a couple hundred years. So they really know what they're doing. So you're not really going to be able to take advantage of an insurance company. Yeah, there might be something that's better priced than something else, but you have to think, not only with insurance, but across the financial service spectrum, that it's very hard to take advantage of something. And then the last thing, Walt, is I know I've gone on a little bit, is when they tell you that it's a secret and that you're going to be the only one who knows this, is that's really a warning sign, is when they say, this is a secret, don't tell anybody, you're one of the few people to know this. So those are some of the warning signs that I would suggest for people to consider.
And when we look at all of this, what would you say would be your top three recommendations for any person, be it young or old, to be mindful of to prevent themselves from becoming a victim of a scam or fraud?
Well, to really stop and think about it is, as I mentioned, the pressure is piled on, especially the time pressure. So, to take the time to really think about it, to do a little research. I would say to talk about it if you are an aging person, talk to kids if you have kids to talk to. If you don't have kids to talk to, maybe talk to your attorney, financial planner, best friend, but talk it out and see if it really makes sense in daylight when you've had time to pick it apart. And then third, come back to ask yourself, is this really something that makes sense for me? Because that's oftentimes what scammers do, is they don't pay attention to what somebody needs. They're just pushing a product or a concept that's needed. And it's so easy to fall subject to that because we get caught up in the features of something. And crypto is a great example. Everybody's like, hey, crypto is great. You're going to make a fortune at crypto. Nobody asks the question is like, well, do I need crypto? Is it going to help me reach my goals? So that's a big thing, is to step back and go, wait a minute, is this even going to help me reach my goals? And that's a huge warning sign as well.
And that's exactly it too, because a lot of people will be like, crypto, I bet you 80% of the people don't even know what the heck crypto is. And yet, you see scammers today engaging folks to make their payment delivery through a crypto ATM machine, even though I'm sure those folks have no clue what the crypto is.
Exactly. And that's, things that I saw in the insurance industry is people would buy policies and they had no idea what they were really buying. They had no idea that the policies were so complex. They had no idea that there were high surrender charges and all these other things. And if I can add one other quick thing, is that's a significant problem in the annuity business, and it's given the whole annuity business a really bad rap, is because there's a lot of annuities that people purchase that they can never get their cash back from and are locked up. So some annuities, that's the purpose, and that's what you want the annuity to do, is to provide it for life. But on a lot of other annuities where you're accumulating money for the future, you want the liquidity to be able to take that money back out, and you can't.
Tony, you talk about annuities, we talk about insurance policies, life insurance policies. For the listeners, I think it would be very important for you to be able to share how they might be able to get in touch with you or learn more about you and your business and your work, because for so many young folks that maybe are starting out, they may be looking to put together a life insurance policy. Where do you even start, and what are the parameters to make sure that you're getting exactly what you should be getting? And maybe some of them have older parents or grandparents that have life insurance policies, and how does all that work, particularly if they have been named as a beneficiary? So essentially, where can our listeners go, Tony, to learn more about you, to contact you, and get the resources that you provide?
Well, they can go to my website, which is my name, TonySteuer.com. They can also find me on LinkedIn. That's pretty much where I hang out, and that's a great place to connect with me. My books are available, through every major online book retailer. The one, to start off on life insurance, more of a reference book is Questions and Answers on Life Insurance, but I also have other books that can help people in different situations. But I do have a lot of free resources on my website, and people can contact me through the website.
And again, that's www.TonySteuer.com, correct?
That's correct. Or you can just Google me if you can't remember exactly how to spell my name. Google Tony Steuer Life Insurance, and you'll definitely find me.
There we go. Tony, I really appreciate you giving us your time today and your valuable perspective and guidance on scam prevention, on insurance policies and all of that. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me, Walt. Glad to be here.
And thank you all, too, for listening. Be safe.
If you've enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to follow One-on-One with Walt Lascos wherever you get your podcasts. Feel free to send comments to walt@lascoscommunications.com. And to learn more about how you might support the prevention of elder financial scams, visit lascoscommunications.com.